好。
Members, good morning. Welcome to the policy briefing cum meeting of the panel on environmental affairs. The meeting will last till 1:30 p.m. And there are a few areas we have to go through. First of all, policy address briefing, followed by the implementation arrangements for municipal solid waste charging. The agenda has been shared with members. First up, information papers issued since the meeting on the 17th of July 2017. We have a total of 2 papers which are included on the agenda. Item 2, items for discussion at the next meeting. Let's first invite the administration in. The next meeting will be held on the 27th of November, which is a Monday at 2:30 p.m. and we will cover 2 items. First of all, expansion of Shuttlecock sewage treatment works and provision of village sewerage in Tongtou, Lei Yun Mun Village and Peng Chau. And number 2, which is another area of concern, and that is the measures to assist the recycling industry to meet the mainland's tightened requirements for import recyclables. So if members are interested about the 24 types of banned recyclables in the mainland, please wait till the next meeting in end November, by which time the government will provide more information papers. Do members agree? So members have no comments on the arrangement. All right. We will have to press some buttons today, so please be reminded of that. Item number 3, briefing by the Secretary for the Environment on the Chief Executive's 2017 policy address. As I said, we have ample time today. We will have almost 2 hours, and we are looking at C brackets 175/1718 brackets 01, and we also have the policy address and policy agenda booklet. So first up, we welcome the Secretary for the Environment and his officials. We first invite the Secretary to brief us on the policy initiatives by a PowerPoint presentation. Today, I will walk you through the key points of the policy address. We want Hong Kong to be a more livable city, and environmental protection is a key aspect. There are a few key initiatives, including climate change, air quality, waste recycling, conservation, and the water quality at Victoria Harbour. And the cross-harbour swim has returned after a long time, and it shows the government's commitment towards promoting a water-friendly culture. In recent years, we have experienced more extreme weather at Hong Kong, and the government will continue to take forward the Hong Kong Climate Action Plan 2030 Plus. And there are areas including mitigation and adaptation. At the new term of the government, we will continue our work at the Steering Committee on Climate Change, and we will continue to implement the blueprint and the relevant initiatives. We also have the Climate Change Working Group on Infrastructure, or CCWGI. We will look at the design standards of relevant infrastructure as well as the resilience against extreme weather. Hopefully, we can make Hong Kong more livable and mitigate the impacts of extreme weather. Meanwhile, the government will also analyze extreme weather and promote publicity and education in order to enhance resilience of the public. In terms of climate change mitigation, we adopt a multi-pronged approach. Our carbon footprint includes promoting clean energy, green transport, and waste reduction. And in terms of replacing coal-fired generation, we will promote renewable energy and implement the Hong Kong Green Blueprint 2015 to 2025, and under the scheme of control agreements, we will promote distributed RE feed-in tariff and the RE certification scheme. And the government is taking the lead by example by promoting renewable facilities as well as green buildings. We will develop large-scale renewable energy facilities, and we have been looking at reservoirs for pilot schemes on floating solar systems. And in terms of air quality, we will continue to implement the air quality objectives or Clean Air Blueprint 2013 to 2020, and we are taking forward the air quality objectives review, which is done every 5 years. In the past month, we completed public engagement and we collected views from stakeholders and the public. We will continue to explore how we can further tighten the standards and the relevant strategies. The review will be completed by 2018. Meanwhile, Hong Kong's air quality has improved substantially in recent years. And for example, for target pollutants, there has been an improvement of 20 to 30%. However, we see that vessels are still the major source of pollutants in Hong Kong. We have put in relevant laws to improve air quality, and we will continue our efforts. We have signed an agreement with the mainland on the emission control area at Pearl River Delta. Starting from January 2019, vessels in Hong Kong waters must use low sulfur fuel in line with the practice of the Pearl River Delta. In the future, vessels sailing near the PRD must use cleaner fuel in order to improve air quality of the entire region. We will also have a pilot scheme on green ferry and green government vessels in order to reduce emissions. And the third aspect is waste reduction and recycling. As we said, low carbon transformation and waste recycling are very important to Hong Kong. We will continue to implement the Hong Kong Blueprint for Sustainable Use of Resources 2013 to 2022, and municipal solid waste charging is a key area. And we will discuss our proposal later today. And we are promoting waste reduction and clean recycling in our community. We will also enhance our outreach services as well as publicity and education on clean recycling, as well as raising awareness of recycling as a whole. We will also enhance the recyclability and recycling value of recyclables. And we are aware that the import requirements on recyclables of the mainland has been tightened in recent years, and this might be an opportunity for Hong Kong. Through optimizing the recycling scheme, we want to help SMEs expand their businesses, and a new initiative has been launched by this recycling fund so that recyclables can be made to comply with mainland import requirements, and the EPD will work more closely with NGOs and stakeholders to support the recycling of recyclables with lower value. For example, the central collection of waste plastic bottles. We will also study the viability of nurturing the local recycling trade, including making use of the site at Eco Park to support the development of relevant trades. For instance, pursuing greater efficiency for the local recycling trade. Food waste represents another major challenge for Hong Kong, and to tackle this challenge, with the establishment of the Organic Resources Recovery Centers, the EPD will set up a new food waste recycling group to study and formulate new regulatory measures on food waste disposal and promote a food-wise culture and food waste recycling. And the food waste campaign has entered a new phase. So with the construction of the recycling centers, we will launch promotion on CNI food waste. In terms of conservation, to answer international calls on control on ivory trade, the government has introduced into LegCo the Protection of Endangered Species of Animals and Plants Amendment Bill 2017 to ban the import and re-export of elephant trophies, phase out the local ivory trade, and increase the penalties for smuggling and illegal trading of endangered species. While banning ivory trade, we will not provide compensation to illicit ivory traders, and we will offer appropriate assistance to affected ivory craftsmen as much as possible. We are finalizing the first Hong Kong Biodiversity Action Plan 2016 to 2021, and we will continue to launch the Hong Kong Biodiversity Festival to encourage people to treasure our biological resources. And this year marks the 40th anniversary of country parks, and the AFCD will launch a series of initiatives in order to promote conservation. The policy address also talked about revitalizing rural areas. They have ample resources and architecture, and the government will enhance conservation of these areas, and we will also revitalize villages and precious heritage resources in order to inject energy to these remote areas. We will promote ecotourism and respond to calls for urban-rural symbiosis. We will set up the Countryside Conservation Office to coordinate rural development plans and promote sustainable development. $1 billion would be earmarked for the relevant conservation works, and the priority of the office would be to promote collaboration with NGOs and promote innovative schemes. For example, the enhancement of the Lai Chi Wall rural restoration works, as well as the Charlottetown Conservation Project. We will review the effectiveness of the scheme with a view to promote these to other areas.
The stage 2 of HATS was completed. Water quality of Victoria Harbour has substantially improved. And in fact, the cross-harbour swim was organized yesterday, following the route which was taken 40 years ago, and that enhanced the water-friendly culture of Hong Kong. As for the issue of foul smell at the waterfront, we are now looking into the dry weather flow interceptors, and we will conduct tendering for the works and to improve water quality. As for the Kuntong preliminary treatment works and sewerage in West Kowloon, the scheme will continue to be promoted, and they will improve water quality of the Victoria Harbour. We will continue our good efforts in the past few years in the 5 areas according to the blueprint in terms of air quality, climate change, reduce waste recycling, nature conservation, and countryside conservation. We have new proposals to strengthen our efforts so that our blueprint can be realized. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wong. I'd like to remind members that our meeting will last until half past 1. And members have pressed the button one after another. We have adequate time, but I want to keep each member's time to 4 minutes. First, Mr. Chen Ha-kan. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I've noticed that in this policy address and also in the previous terms of the government, a lot of efforts have been put into the issue of municipal solid waste, and I support the principle of the polluters pay principle. Therefore, in recent years, the administration has introduced a number of fee charging arrangements, charging on bottles, charging on drink cans, and we will discuss MSW charging. But all these are penalties, all these are fines people are asked to pay. But it seems that there is little incentive given to people to reduce waste apart from imposing a penalty or fine. And therefore, people try to dodge the fine, say by fly tipping. And if you introduce MSW charging, then waste will be brought to the office or brought to the next housing estate. So will there be any incentive to encourage people to reduce waste? Say if I cut waste by a certain quantity, if I save energy by a certain number of units, if I save water by a certain unit, then I will be given a certain reward. Can you give any incentive or reward to people so that they can cut the production of waste? It will be more effective. You have the carrot and stick, and that will also help to reduce fly tipping. That the government is not short of money. You're flooded with money. Your coffers are flooded. Public coffers are flooded with money. So it's better to provide incentive to reduce waste. As I have always said, the use of renewable energy is very low. The government aims at 1 or 2%, but if you look at the European countries or North America, they aim at 10%. Do we have the determination to achieve that? 2 questions, Mr. Wong. Thank you, Mr. Chen, for your question. Thank you, Chairman. As for charging, municipal waste charging according to volume, my colleague will take that question. As for other questions, we have already launched the action plan, the climate change action plan, and we also will also have a new SCA to encourage the use of renewable energy, and we'll make use of space available in the reservoirs to introduce solar systems, floating solar systems. We also have retro commissioning of our government buildings and also install solar panels on our government buildings. So we make use of space available to develop energy, solar energy. Now, we can use solar energy, wind energy, and also waste into energy. According to mature technology, each will contribute about 1 to 1.5%. Is the percentage low? If you look at overseas countries, they set high targets, but the majority of energy is coming from hydroelectric power and also thermal power. So it is, and they are short. Hong Kong is short of such resources. Well, I think you need to wait for the carrot next time. You have to wait in the queue. Next, Mr. Frankie Yik. Chairman, I have 3 questions. Para 14, mandating vessels to use compliant fuel within Hong Kong waters. I've said that in the mainland since 2019, vessels approaching Hong Kong and the mainland will have to adopt low sulfur fuel. The concession given to the mainland is bigger. The additional cost will be about 55% to 38%, but the subsidy given in mainland will be up to 70% to maintain fair competition. Will the administration consider enhancing its subsidy by reducing charges? And will the administration continue to extend that concession? As for the pilot scheme on green ferry and green government vessels, as you all know, as the government also knows, that in the institution that I am working, we are the avant-garde in adopting green fuel. Will the administration provide subsidy so that the ferries can change the engines? Many ferries have old engines and they have to be replaced. Will you encourage the use of green ferry technologies by providing subsidy to replacement engines? I'm concerned about the waste tires and also waste batteries or vehicles. The problem is that there is no recycling, and therefore some people are being prosecuted. So will you follow the WEEE scheme so that a fee will be added and to such equipment, and then the administration will also encourage people to participate in recycling of these? Mr. Yik, thank you for your question. My colleague will answer the first 2 questions. As for the last question, we're actively considering regulating the handling of WEEE. We have a policy for electric cars. As for car batteries, recycling is not a very serious problem, but with more electric cars, then the scale of the problem will increase, and we are considering dealing with that. 2 other questions are about ferries. Yes, thank you. Chairman, the first, about the subsidy. At present, we give concessions, and it will last until the 31st of August 2018, and this will have an impact on the competition of the ports in the region. Before the 31st of August, 31st of March 2018, we will consider how to deal with that. We will also review the measures in other ports nearby. In the mainland, they have made some changes, and that is also taken into consideration. As for the question of whether old ferries or vessels will be given a particular subsidy, just like the commercial diesel vehicles. In considering pollution caused by vessels, the main source of pollution comes from ocean-going vessels coming from overseas, and we focus our efforts on them. Now we propose a pilot scheme aiming at ferries which carry hundreds of people. Now, should we have specific measures for smaller vessels? Well, in terms of causing air pollution, they play a smaller part. Now we have to consider the outcome of the pilot scheme before we consider expanding the scheme. Chairman, just a word. I'm talking about the so-called working ferry, working vessels rather than pleasure crafts. Ms. Clark. I'm concerned about climate change and also our action plan. I'm glad to see it in paragraphs 4 and 5. The administration will coordinate efforts of government works departments to enhance our adaptation capability to combat climate change and also to enhance resilience against extreme weather. Well, that's forward-looking, and I appreciate that. But my concern is that we are facing extremes in our climate. There will be stronger winds and greater storms. And also, I'm concerned about ability to deal with landslides. There is not adequate time to discuss these issues in detail. I'm glad to hear from the administration about the details in dealing with all these issues. I'm also concerned about a topic which is less mentioned, and that's about noise pollution and light pollution. Little has been said in these two areas in the policy address, but these do undermine people's health, and there is no active measure in dealing with light pollution. As for noise pollution, you might have heard from news that in the pedestrian precinct there is a serious problem of noise pollution. Even in the parks of the new territories, in parks which are close to people's residence. Some people are using their acoustic systems or loudspeakers very loudly when they are enjoying themselves in the park. And how are you going to deal with that? The Undersecretary. First on light pollution. We have a charter on light pollution, and many shops and companies have already signed up for the charter. And we are looking at the overall effect of the charter. If need be, we may consider more measures. We want to give some time to the implementation of the charter. Many companies at the start have signed up the charter, and they have imposed measures to reduce the light pollution.
In terms of noise, we are also very concerned about this issue. But very often, public noise pollution has to do with our way of living, so it's beyond just a pollution issue. So we would have to gauge how well the society would accept pollution generated by various sources. So we have to look at the issue from a holistic perspective. So this is a more complicated issue. In terms of climate change, there's a steering committee chaired by the Chief Secretary, which would coordinate the work of different bureaus and departments. In terms of climate change mitigation, we will look at certain standards on resilience against climate change, and there's a dedicated committee in the government to deal with such work. We will draw up standards What about light pollution and noise pollution? Basically, he said next to nothing. We have not any specific initiatives. And basically, his attitude is just wait and see. But for people affected by light or noise pollution, they have no time to wait. All right, we will meet them very soon. Thank you very much, Mr. Ted Hui. Thank you. In terms of the use of renewable energy, even though feed-in tariff has been mentioned in the scheme of control agreements, but on a community level, even though I do not know what the final tariffs will look like, the entire package doesn't seem too appealing to the public. So I'm afraid that at the end the government would take up all the work, but the general public would not be able to take part. Renewable energy is not just about the energy savings percentage. The key is to enhance public awareness and drive behavioral change. So under the buildings ordinance or legislation or your policies, will there be more room for the public to participate and use renewable energy or wind energy? In paragraph 9 or 19, you said you will have outreach teams to take care of waste reduction and recycling, but how much can you actually do? Do you have a target in mind, Secretary? Would these just be a showcase, or do you actually want to achieve something? You must do a substantial amount of work if you are to really support trade. So can you tell us more about the role of these outreach teams? For the first question, I will invite my colleague to talk about renewable energy. For the outreach teams, we will send a pilot outreach team to several districts, and we will look at the manpower position and review the progress or efficiency before we think about extending it to all 18 districts. So we take it one step at a time. So this is a process of interaction and dedication of resources. In terms of promoting renewable energy, we are negotiating with the two power companies details of the future feed-in tariff. With the exception of big corporations, we realize that some members of the public are also interested, for example, those in village houses. Apart from tariff, we are also negotiating with both power companies how we can streamline the feed-in procedure as well as the connection arrangements. We are also discussing with the relevant departments. In the past, there were constraints in developing RE, and now we are discussing with the relevant departments on how we can overcome those restrictions so that the public would find it more convenient. Apart from feed-in tariff, we will also have RE certificates. The public can purchase RE certificates if they want to support the development of RE. Secretary, I asked about the waste reduction outreach teams. Do you have specific targets, or how much waste could be reduced? This depends on the actual situation. We are talking about reducing waste at source and to promote clean recycling. We adopt a more pragmatic approach by identifying certain pilot districts, and we will see the results before thinking about our way forward. All right, thank you very much. Next, Mr. Stephen Ho. The biggest achievement of the Environment Bureau is the establishment of the icon, Big Waster, and the children all love it. However, promotion should not be the key of your work. Policies are even more important. The next item on the agenda is related. It's about MSW charging. In the past, we carried out a lot of studies, and we realized that with MSW charging, Hong Kong will suffer initially. But we have not seen a holistic plan from the Environment Bureau on how you can reduce waste. How would you support single-story buildings? And with the rubbish piling up, how much money would you spend on clearing the trash? You might say that this is about habit, but at least you should produce a plan. You talked about the local recycling trade, but it might not be realistic to carry out the recycling completely locally. So it's about building a relationship with the mainland. Since the Green Mile program in 2013, the government has not made substantial changes in policy in encouraging recyclers to transform themselves. If our recyclables end up in the mainland, has the Hong Kong government signed any agreement with the mainland government so that whenever there's any change to the policy, we would be notified as soon as possible? And number 3, I'm quite disappointed that there's no mentioning in the policy address on studies on agricultural land and illegal dumping or fly tipping. The government might have to resume agricultural land in the future. You might be resuming other sites to support the Northeast anti-developments. However, some landlords and developers want to obstruct the use of agricultural land. Even if I call the government departments, you cannot catch anyone. So you are being very unfair to farmers, and you are infuriating the farmers. 3 questions. I will invite our colleagues to address the first 2 questions. In other words, the cross-departmental work for the focus group, as well as some impacts on the local recycling trade. I will answer the 3rd question first. As I've said on multiple occasions, we will make better use of technology to manage the dumping of construction waste. This is something we can add on in later meetings. Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. As for MSW charging, after it's implemented, we realize that in other countries there might be initial pains, and illegal dumping might worsen initially. So in terms of law enforcement, we will work with different departments, and hopefully we can do more. And secondly, in terms of publicity, we need comprehensive publicity efforts in order to build new habits. Before implementing the actual MSW charging scheme, we'll have a long preparation period of 12 to 16 months, and during this time, we will carry out education and publicity to inform the public about the charging arrangements. In the first half a year, it will be a transitional period, and we will issue verbal warnings, and we will wait till the public is familiar before we enforce the laws strictly. Mr. Lo Ai-kwok, don't worry, the next item will be MSW charging, and at the end of the month, we will specifically talk about our collaboration with the mainland. Mr. Lo Ai-kwok, thank you. Mr. Stephen Ho, there's no need to worry, because I'm just going to follow up on the issue we all care about. I support the government's MSW charging scheme, which is to promote clean recycling and waste reduction. So all 3 of these are correlated. And the public should be convinced that the government does not intend to charge as much as they can. The less the better. And we want to promote clean recycling and waste reduction at source. And there should be ample recycling channels or facilities. This final point is most important. If the public realizes that the clean recyclables would end up in landfills, then your entire policy would be obsolete. So the key is to conduct the recycling properly. For for the issue of waste paper, Hong Kong has a population of 7 million. So it's not possible for Hong Kong to take care of all the operations along the recycling chain. We need to collaborate with others. And for the local recycling trade to be sustainable, we must give them support. And for the WEE recycling, the government has played a proactive role, and hopefully we can achieve results in recycling. For the remaining, what is your plan? Land is a major issue, and with the shortage of land, some recycling operations as well as other industrial operations end up in the same industrial estate, and this is not ideal because this would affect other industries. So I hope the Secretary can give me a bigger picture of your action plan. Assistant or Deputy Director, thank you very much. In terms of supporting the local recycling trade, we realize that the mainland is tightening the requirements on imported recyclables. And as Mr. Low said, well, in the paper we have explained our work. We will first optimize the recycling fund, and in the past there have been specific initiatives under the fund which serve to optimize the working of the recycling trade. Enhancing land support is also important. And for berths at public cargo working areas for waste paper recyclers, this is certainly helpful to them. We want to reduce the reliance on exporting for our recyclables. So going forward, we will see how the Eco Park site can support our promotion of the local recycling trade.
In fact, we want to remove restrictions. We have started the market survey to understand the situation, say for those who will make use of, who will gauge the interest of making use of Eco Park for waste paper recycling. After we obtain the information, we will embark on tendering. We want to get your support. We need various facilities to assist the development of recycling businesses in Hong Kong. As said by Dr. Low, we cannot deal with all the recyclables in Hong Kong. Therefore, we need to expand our market, our overseas market, and that is also one of the ways to help the local industry. We are working through the TDC to explore the Southeast Asian market. We'll work with the recycling trade, and will provide more briefings to the recycling trade to help them to explore and expand their market. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. Thank you, Chairman. The Secretary just said that the cross-harbor swim has been organized and water quality has improved. That is a piece of evidence. But I didn't participate in the cross-harbor swim race. But some swimmers told me that the water near the shore was still poor. And there is also the problem of floating refuse in Tsim Sha Tsui East, which I where I frequent. There is a problem of floating refuse. Now, when there is floating refuse, it is under the auspices of the Marine Department, and when there is low tide, and when water is when the refuse is at the shore, then it belongs to the FEHD. So it's a problem which has fallen between two stools, and how can you deal with that? And there is also the issue of municipal solid waste. I will speak on food waste recycling. Now, the MSW charging does not include food waste, and CNI waste, food waste, it will become part of CNI waste, but not domestic or municipal solid waste. Among the MSW food waste, in fact, account for quite a large proportion. If you're not dealing with food waste, then that has become a serious problem. Will you give incentive to the management companies to help the residents to handle food waste? And I really don't know how you're going to solve the problem if you don't deal with food waste. The director will speak on interdepartmental cooperation in dealing with refuse on the shore and also floating refuse. The administration is strengthening its efforts on dealing with foul smell along the shore, and to improve water, and we will continue our efforts to improve water quality. Say, when Taipei, turning to municipal solid waste charging, at the start Taipei didn't deal with food waste. After they've established their treatment facilities, then they start to deal with food waste. As for Milan, it started with CNI food waste 11 years ago. And for food waste, for handling food waste, domestic food waste, they only started that a few years ago. Now, we support the handling of food waste for CNI institutions. First, because there are rather quite a number of constraints in dealing with food waste for domestic buildings. The director. Now, there is a working group in the EPD to deal with the issue raised by Mr. Leung. That working group has all the relevant government departments, including the LCSD, the Marine Department, FEHD, and also AFCD. They are working together to deal with the problem. We need to stop pollution at source, or waste at source. Because of typhoon or because of sinking of ships, a lot of waste is generated, and we need to stop it at source. We're working very closely also with the mainland, and we also conduct analysis of currents to deal with floating refuse. We want to prevent them from getting on shore. As for dropping of waste into the water or in the waters, we also work with the departments, NGOs, and also other groups. Director, I think maybe we need to ask Mr. Leung to wait. If you just start answering the question at about 3 minutes, that will not be enough time to answer the question. Mr. Ho, Mr. Junius Ho, I want to follow up on the point raised by members in respect of renewable energy. Paragraph 9. They said that the people will be encouraged to participate. The community will be asked to encouraged to invest in distributed RE under the leadership of Mr. Lau, the chairman of the rural committees. There are about 130,000 very small houses, and they can participate in the solar energy scheme. Now, under page 14, under the technical memorandum, solar panels are allowed to build on rooftops, but there is only a restriction on loading, but there is no restriction on coverage and height. If you can work with the Development Bureau and clarify the various technical restrictions concerning these structures, that will certainly help to improve the promotion the use of RE. I've asked your colleagues, I've met with your colleagues, and we have had meetings with the buildings department as well. I hope that you can clarify these issues, and that will be more efficient in implementing the use of RE. The Deputy Secretary, Mr. Ho, met with the Lands Department and Buildings Department, and our colleagues were also involved. And after the meeting, Mr. Ho gave us a proposal. Now we've read the proposal. We'll work with the Development Bureau to see what more we can do within the existing constraints so as to encourage the use of renewable energy. I also want to ask one more question, with your permission, Madam Chairman. I still have some time. Seeing is believing. Sometimes theories are too far away, and if the owners are able to see the real thing, they will find it more convincing. Now, if the Buildings Department and the Development Bureau can set up one or two models, then people will be able to see the effect. So action speaks louder than words. So in your pioneer scheme or pilot scheme, can there be a model home for different areas so that the owners can see the real thing with their own eyes? Well, with regard to the timetable for distributed RE or FIT, we will report to the Council at the beginning of next year, and under the new SCA, right at the start, we can launch the FIT. And with FIT, there will be incentive for the owners of very small houses to install their solar panels, and that will be, and they will take the lead. Next, Mr. Lau. Concerning RE, the 40,000, I've consulted the owners of 40,000 odd houses, and I hope that the scheme can be implemented so that the rural community can participate in reducing emission. Well, in the policy address, it said that there will be an office set up for rural conservation. This will help to promote development of villages, and $1 billion have been earmarked for conservation efforts. Earlier on, there was a report of outside village. It is given $2 million by the Lions Club for the setting up for the construction of a special center for promotion of rural culture. Now, without the revitalization efforts, the villages will disappear. The revitalization efforts in Kaohsiung is a good example. I hope the administration will put in more resources and take the lead in conserving rural culture. With regard to the setting up of the Rural Conservation Office, it comes under the EPD. The Countryside Conservation Office, it comes under the EPD, and many people will be invited to join. But if you only have environmental efforts without the participation of rural interests, then you will not be able to hear voices from different sectors. As for the money, is it just for Lychee Wall and also conservation of Charlottetown? Will you consider other places? And how much can that $1 billion last for all the conservation projects? Well, my colleagues will speak on 2 points first. I will only speak on 2 points first. And the elements for rural countryside conservation is that local people should participate, and then those living in the urban areas will also participate, and also the government will have a role to play. Now, there are concern groups, and that concern groups include representatives of the villagers. That is also crucial. And of course, there are also environmental concern groups and other groups. As for Lychee Wall, it is a good example, and we want to make it a sort of model. As for Charlottetown, it has high ecological conservation value, and we should give priority to this. Now, we will continue to expand our efforts to cover the areas. My colleague will supplement. Well, thank you.
I will introduce the work of the Countryside Conservation Office and how we will spend the $1 billion. There are 2 main areas. First, conservation and revitalization efforts. We want to support NGOs in their work. And as we also realize that collaboration with villages are also important, we want to come up with innovative conservation projects. And we also want to promote sustainable economic activities such as ecotourism, and we also want to enhance small works. We will identify facilities which can be improved, for example, roads, street lighting, waste recycling facilities, as well as restoration of certain village houses. If the Bureau can come back to the panel for details, it would be ideal. Mr. Kent Leung informed me that he intends to move a motion on this item. The motion would be shared with members, and I will deal with this member's motion, which is about water quality. Mr. Kent Leung, thank you. I will talk about my motion in a moment. So I'd like to talk about a bigger issue on climate change and renewable energy. I went to Shek Pek Reservoir earlier on the floating solar panel system. I'd like to know the roadmap and timeline for this pilot scheme so that we will consider whether we will come up with bigger floating solar farms. And my second question is about renewable energy. I realize that solar power would be the most viable form of renewable energy because other forms of energy, such as wind power, might not be suitable, or geothermal energy, they might not be suitable for our city. And for locations such as the footbridge or slopes, etc., would they be feasible? Recently, some green groups shared with me some formulas and figures on the feed-in tariff scheme. So when the government calculates feed-in tariff, what are the factors which would be incorporated into the formula? Secretary, in terms of our roadmap for floating solar power system, we have 2 pilot schemes which would last 1 year. And we also have a consultancy study which would advise us on whether or not to expand the program. As for footbridges and other facilities which could incorporate solar panels, as we said, $200 million have been invested in government venues which would incorporate solar power and renewable energy. The formula for FIT, our feed-in tariff would incorporate several factors, including the construction costs or installation costs for renewable energy. We hope to recover the cost or even achieve a level of profit. And we will also consider whether the tariff is appealing enough to attract RE investments, and we will also consider its impact on the electricity tariff rate. And we hope that the impact on the electricity tariff is negligible. Of the 3 factors, which of them would be the most significant? I think a lot of people who want to invest in RE would be interested in this. Would you consider the profits of the power companies more, or would you consider the interests of the stakeholders? I'd like to know which side you tend to lean on. When introducing feed-in tariff, we hope that it would be appealing in order to promote RE development in the technology in this community. So the appeal is very important. Next, Mrs. Peter Shiu. I want to ask about paragraph 17 on producer responsibility schemes. Last year we talked about the incinerator and landfills. Generally, suppliers and retailers had no objections, but for the downstream recyclers, they expressed their concerns over license application or the identification of land, etc. We realize that the grace period has been extended to 18 months. And I'd like to know how many recyclers have applied for licenses from you, Deputy Director. Thank you very much. For the PRS on waste, electrical and electronic equipment, or WPRS, with regards to licensing arrangements, we will push back the schedule, having considered the views of stakeholders at LegCo. We will push back the implementation date, and it will only come into force at the end of next year. As for the number of licenses, starting from June, we have been accepting applications from downstream recyclers. We have received 5 or 6 applications, and they will be dealt with according to the established procedures. Any follow-up questions? If you only have 5 or 6 applications, it's not ideal because we have a lot of recyclers in Hong Kong. You should step up publicity so that they know what to do when their licenses are up and how they can make applications. I think noise pollution is also under the ambit of the Environment Bureau. We have seen a lot of news about the problem of noise in the Mong Kok pedestrian areas, and some shops had to put up noise barriers. During weekends and holidays, it should be a leisure area for the public. However, people are using big loudspeakers in a very congested area, so at the end you cannot hear anything. And the noise is getting more and more serious, and the entire street is extremely noisy. And the shops had to put up with very loud noises of more than 100 decibels. But the government said that there's no problem with noise, and the residents would not go home before 10 p.m. because it's too noisy. I'd like to see what you can do. Ms. Au. For the use of loudspeakers or audio players in public places, it's currently regulated by noise control ordinance by the police. They would issue oral reminders or penalty tickets if necessary. In Shen Shui Po and Mong Kok, the police has issued 21 tickets, and only $500 fines were given. I just saw that myself this Saturday. Usually we would remind them to stay quiet and adjust the direction of their loudspeakers. What is the maximum penalty right now? The current penalty is about $1,000 to $2,000. So there is regulation, and we hope that the public would be and users would be cooperative. I can say that this is not the way to go. Ms. Ellie Chu. I have 3 quick questions. First, on renewable energy. Apart from feed-in tariff and the certification scheme, is the government considering tax deductions or subsidies so that users can purchase solar panels? Would the government consider setting a target in terms of the ratio of RE to total production of energy? The current waste disposal ordinance needs to be reviewed, as Mr. Stephen Ho suggested. And I realize that there's a judicial review underway. So for the waste disposal ordinance or the management of construction waste, are you just going to cash the site owner or driver the actual polluter has very little responsibility. For example, the contractors. Would you consider holding the polluter responsible instead? You will review the air quality objectives, and while we review the AQOs, would the government consider how these AQOs could be met, or else the government might be held legally liable? Is this something we can think about when we review the air quality control ordinance? Of course, the government would draw policies and objectives, and our teams would be responsible. But as to whether there's any performance targets, this is a very big issue. It might not just have to do with the AQOs. It can apply to other areas. Every year, there are 1,500 deaths unnatural deaths due to air pollution. Deputy Director, perhaps I will talk about the renewable energy facilities. According to the Inland Revenue Ordinance, for green facilities attached to buildings, the depreciation period is shortened to 5 years from 25. So in other words, they are entitled to 20% annual tax deductions. With the feed-in tariff arrangements, the deductions would be even higher. We hope that expenditure on RE devices could be rebated within a short frame, or even generate profits. As for RE targets, under the climate change blueprint, by the year 2030, RE would make up 30 to 40% of the total. Under the new scheme of control agreements, we would encourage the power companies to develop RE. We can wait for the second round if necessary. Next, Mr. Hu Chi-fung. Thank you. I just heard that RE would make up 30 to 40% of our fuel mix. Can you give more details on that?
Concerning these 3 to 4%, how are they to be distributed within the whole system? Do they come from government buildings, or the food waste recycling center, which will generate renewable energy, or from NT-Northeast, you make use of methane? So what is the percentage that will be taken up by the two power companies? Mr. Wong, I refer to 3 to 4%. I mean that by 2030, the potential for generating renewable energy is up to that level. It doesn't mean that it's a target. And there are technical and also financial constraints for developing renewable energy. As for the distribution of RE, waste into energy, solar energy and wind energy are each about 1.5%. The EMSD is conducting a consultancy study in respect of installing solar panels and the potential for generating electricity. In the past, there was an estimate which looked at the overall situation without taking into constraints. Now, even if you have such a potential, but there may be a tall building nearby, there may be other constraints, so that one cannot make full use of solar energy. Now, we hope that very soon there will be an outcome from the study. Now, concerning the 3 to 4%, I know that they come from solar energy, wind energy. But I want to ask, generally speaking, the potential that can be provided by different units, say, for example, the two power companies, the government buildings, government facilities, how much will be contributed by them, and also how much will be contributed by the FIT scheme, which depends on the participation of the general public. As for wind energy, you say the community can make use of wind farms, but the wind farms are closely related to the two power companies. As for waste into energy, methane from landfills can be used. Some companies can participate. For example, the one in Timon, the power company has made use of methane for generating electricity, but waste into energy will mainly be a government action. As for solar energy, the government will also play a part, and through our e-certificate system, there will be participation by the public. I hope the Secretary will give me an answer in writing. I want to see the distribution in terms of wind, solar energy, wind and solar energy, and waste into energy. But I just want to know the contribution of the stakeholders, and I also want to know the measures to be introduced by the government in respect of imposing responsibilities on government departments and also related institutions, and also the setting of targets. Yes, please provide us a paper on that. I also hope that our research division will study the incentives and also tax incentives for renewable energy, and also my question is not covered in the post address. Is about electric cars. At the development panel, I asked a question on two sides taken up by the Housing Society on whether development can be made. And the EPD or the Environment Bureau and AFCD were not involved in this study. Earlier on, the first registration tax concession has been cut for electric cars. In the past few months, the first-time registration of electric cars have dropped substantially, and many owners have resorted to petrol vehicles. But there was a substantial increase 1 month before the new measure. Now, the administration has set a target that by 2020, 30% of the vehicles should be hybrid vehicles or electric cars. Only 3 years have left. Yet, the overall registration of electric cars only account for about a percentage in single digit. And also, the Ombudsman's office has considered the provision of charging facilities for electric cars. It's a kind of chicken and egg problem. According to government policy, the provision of charging will be mainly provided at home and also in workplaces, and the charging is very slow. suppose half of the charges are for slow charging, then will you provide fast charging facilities, more fast charging facilities? My colleague will give a more detailed answer. To give a simple answer, you're right. Hong Kong is a relatively small place, so the provision of a charger at home or at workplace should be the main arrangement, and the government only provides ancillary facilities for charging. And we do have a plan for providing medium to high speed charging facility. Would there be an adjustment of policy in terms of providing chargers? Chairman, we want to reiterate this point. This is different from petrol vehicles. You can't have a petrol tank at home, so you need to fill up at the petrol station. But for electric cars, people can recharge their vehicles at the car park at home or at the car park at the workplaces. And you may have an occasional need to charge at a place away from your home or your office. So our part is to assist the car parks and the housing estates to provide charging facilities. As said by the Secretary, in 2011, we introduced measures in terms of GFA concessions to enable the car parks to provide charging spaces. And in fact, different companies are working with owners' corporations and owners of buildings to provide charging facilities in the housing estates. Electric car vendors also provide charging facilities. These are the measures to enable the owners to charge their vehicles before they start. And as for public chargers, be they provided? Yes, I understand your point. I just asked you to provide for high-speed chargers. We have a plan to provide medium-speed chargers. For the slow chargers, they may require 20 odd hours. And a medium-speed charger will fully charge a vehicle in 2 hours' time. So it is not too long. Thank you. We'll start MSW charging at 1:45 to 1. And I see 6 members on the list. And they are still waiting. And I ask the parties concerned, the parties who are to answer our questions, to come earlier. Chairman, I want to ask a question on electric cars. Carbon emission by vehicles is a serious source of pollution. In cities which are more positive in dealing with carbon emission, they set targets of phasing out petrol vehicles. In the past few years, some cities are working very hard on that, and they have been providing electric chargers all over the place to encourage people making use of electric cars. But it seems that Hong Kong is not doing that. Now, after the removal, in fact, you act contrarily. You reduce the tax concession on first-time registration tax of electric cars. Therefore, the growth in electric cars is next to zero. The administration's argument is that it doesn't want to encourage people to buy cars. But you cannot achieve that. People just switch to petrol vehicles. So your plan doesn't work. Will you reinstate the complete waiver on first-time registration tax of electric cars, or you adopt other incentive measures to encourage people to buy electric cars? I thank Ms. Quite for the question. Madam Chairman, in overseas countries, they set eco or green vehicle targets. We talk to them. They do not require the conversion of all vehicles into electric cars. In fact, some want to phase out diesel vehicles. Some want to encourage hybrid vehicles. I hope you will have no misunderstanding. They don't set any targets to replace all vehicles with electric cars. Please do not misunderstand the policy of their cities. Well, they say they will phase out just for political correctness. As for the removal or the adjustment of the first-time registration tax, if you look at more cities which are more positive, say in Norway, in Scandinavia, the maximum concession is 1,000 euros. So if you look at our concession, ours is not low, even after the reduction of the concession. The policy will be reviewed in March and April next year, and we will announce our arrangements later. Mr. Dichu. Chairman. Sometimes it's good even to talk about targets. If you talk about it, then there is pressure to work towards the target, and there will be follow-up action. As for the promotion of electric cars and also replacement of diesel vehicles and petrol vehicles, I hope that there can be such a target if other big cities are having such targets. It seems that Hong Kong is going the other way around, and that's not correct.
In terms of renewable energy, we talked about objectives, but you talked about potential. I think talking about potential is very vague. We have a lot of potential, but we need the government to be committed as well. So we hope the government can give us more aggressive targets. For instance, for bottled water or plastic bottles, they have given us very big headaches, and now the government is saying they will carry out the recycling in a central manner. So are we going to phase out bottled water completely? When we look at Taipei, even though bottled water is not yet banned, they have stopped using bottled water in public organizations and schools, and the same treatment is given for one-off eating utensils. So can the government come up with more aggressive targets? We have been talking about plastic bottles for a very long time, so why don't we just ban them altogether? Secretary, in recent years, the Environment Bureau has drawn up different goals across different areas, so we would try to be aggressive if possible, on areas such as waste reduction, air quality, etc. As for bottled water, we have said that we will study a new producer responsibility scheme in Hong Kong on these plastic bottles. This is a way to eliminate the problem going forward. Chairman, I don't agree with the Secretary that producer responsibility scheme on plastic bottles would tackle the root of the problem. The root of the problem are these petroleum companies, so why don't we be more aggressive and ban them altogether? Perhaps he would not be able to answer this question, so let's wait for the next round. Mr. Hu Chi-fung. In the previous term, I have told the government that some recyclers should be valuable and we should learn from Taipei. I hope the government or Secretariat can share why Hong Kong cannot adopt the Taipei model, and that is fixing prices or establishing prices for different recyclables. If we do not use this approach, but just talk about producer responsibility schemes, so what would happen even if I pay? So I hope the Secretary can tell us why Hong Kong cannot adopt the Taipei approach. When we talk about plastics, as I've said, they are valuable, but they must be processed properly. That takes us back to the same question on whether we can draw up prices for these plastics. As for electric vehicles, this is a chicken and egg problem. In Hong Kong, we have almost 600,000 registered vehicles. Some are on the road, some not. Would you have subsidies for pre-Euro 4 diesel vehicles? If you feel that roadside vehicles would substantially affect air quality, shouldn't this be an area of work for you? This way we can draw up standards for electric vehicles, and we can set up a target of electric vehicles in respect to the total number of vehicles. The government said, well, otherwise we cannot achieve the target of 30 to 35% of hybrid vehicles. You have 8 seconds. Secretary. I will give you some leeway. Chairman. Mr. Wu has been discussing the first question with us for some time. I think he just wants the Secretariat to follow up on that. As for electric vehicles, Hong Kong is very different from other places. Hong Kong's main roadside pollutant is related to commercial vehicles. So even if we waive the first-time registration tax for electric vehicles, we should draw priorities in our work. Mr. Kent Lau, Chairman. I feel that it's a must to enhance roadside air quality. For commercial and private vehicles, it's the same. Does the government have targets on improving indoor air quality? Who would take this question? Mrs. Chang. Thank you. For indoor AQO, there is no statutory requirement, but we have a set of guidelines in place on the main air quality indicators in an office. And if air quality is substandard, we also have guidelines in place to suggest what can be done. The practices at, say, elderly homes and offices might be different. Every year, we would invite different units to take part. They would be asked to take measurements indoors, and after that, we can discuss improvement measures. In recent years, the WHO published new standards, so we will see whether there's room for improvement on these standards. A lot of contagious diseases come through air conditioners. Now the government would encourage schools to use air conditioners. So would schools and elderly homes take proactive measures? Thank you. For indoor quality, when air conditioners have been operating for a long time, there might be mold inside, and the opening might not be clean. We have issued guidelines on the cleaning of molds. Any follow-up questions? I will first invite Mr. Ted Hui to speak. I've received 2 more motions, one by Dr. Junius Ho, the Deputy Chairman, and the second from Ted Hui. The one from Dr. Junius Ho is about solar power. It's about renewable energy. Ted Hui's motion is about electric vehicles. And it's not mentioned in this policy address, but in the previous policy address in January, the EA panel has discussed that issue, and the former secretary talked about it. We will invite Kenneth Leung, Junius Ho, and Ted Hui to talk about their motions. First of all, Mr. Ted Hui. I would like to speak on electric vehicles. In 2009, the Financial Secretary chaired a steering committee on promoting electric vehicles. So what is the committee still in operation, and how is the interaction between them and your work? As for the concession cap on first-time buyers of electric vehicles, since the cap at $97,000 last time, you can see that the development of the popularization of electric vehicles stagnated. If a buyer would replace his diesel vehicle with electric vehicle, will you provide any financial incentives? Secretary, the steering committee is still in operation, and it's chaired by the Financial Secretary, and the Environment Bureau plays an important role. As for the first-time registration tax, and its relevant review. It's a very sensitive topic, and this is something the Financial Secretary will decide on. And at this stage, we welcome views from stakeholders and legislators. So the government will come up with a decision by next year. He did not talk about the tax concession. Would you consider the one-to-one tax concession? These questions are very sensitive. Any follow-up questions? Anything related to tax is highly sensitive. Anything else from Mr. Tat Hui? All right, now it's my turn. Our officials from the next item have all arrived, save for one. I'd like to ask about the steering committee. When the Ombudsman launched an investigation, I went on to radio, and apparently the committees was no longer in operation since September, but it has subsequently been restarted, and the term lasts from August 17 to September 18, and the Financial Secretary chairs the committee. So instead of encouraging you and offering tax concessions, the chairman apparently dominates the development of electric vehicles, and with the imposing of a cap on the first-time registration tax, has the Secretary for Environment been consulted? We could not disclose the details, but we are involved in the policy making, and we have different bureaus and the Financial Secretary on board. The growth of private vehicles is a cause for concern. We might be able to control individual emissions, but the vehicles will still create congestions. You said you will convert the slow charges to medium speed charges. What is the roadmap? Are you going to work on the 1700 charges? We are doing the work phase by phase. We can share a timeline with you if you're interested. Mr. Frankie Yik, final member for this round. I want to talk about how we can encourage the use of electric vehicles. If we want to promote electric vehicles, the Secretary should consider whether a total waiver of the first registration tax is warranted. I suggest you to charge a fee for a dedicated fund, and you said it wasn't possible. But the Chief Executive said that it's actually possible. You lowered the cap to about $90,000. Well, if you are to promote electric vehicles, you must encourage automobile operators to offer cheaper cars. If you want to promote electric vehicles, you must first lower the costs. And I actually support the proposal. Without filibustering, the motions would be moved very soon, but I tend to support the government's practice. It's always good to know more.
Mr. Xiu, you are the last one, because we have to deal with 3 motions. 3 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. I want to speak on paragraph 25, protection of endangered species concerning ivory. You are very firm in respect of those who are lawful. You will not allow them to sell ivory products in the coming 5 years, and there will be no compensation. The ivory traders in Hong Kong are doing lawful work, lawful business. Those who poach the ivories, poach the elephants, they are lawbreakers. The direction is done overseas, and yet they can get away with it. Now you penalize the ivory traders. Now you say that in fact the ivory is their asset because they possessed that long time ago. And in overseas countries, there are museums for collection of ivory crafts. Now, can we have a kind of museum? The government can buy up the ivory artifacts, and then that will help the ivory traders. Well, we have exchanged our views on various occasions in this respect. As said in the policy address, we must send a clear message to local and also overseas parties concerned. And there is justification for sending out a firm message, and I hope Mr. Siu can help us to communicate with the trade so as to establish this clear position. It's very clear that they are scapegoats. You gave them licenses. Then it is really unreasonable to stop the sale of ivory. Say, for example, if, say, the problem with avian flu, you kill the chickens, you compensate the chicken stalls. Well, if I think it is private property, even if there is a law that is still private property, and you need to respect that. You care about international trends, but you have not cared for them, and they will come to protest. Well, let's deal with the first motion. The first motion is moved by Mr. Leung. This panel affirms the good efforts of the heads of the EPD and urge the Bureau to implement Stage 2 of HATS as soon as possible. Can I be given a minute? Yes, that's what I think. Now we have a quorum that can be a division. After waiting for 40 years, finally I can swim in the middle of the harbor from Tsim Sha Tsui to the Golden Bohemia Square. Water quality yesterday is better than the water quality of many beaches in Hong Kong. That's a subjective feeling. I appreciate your effort, but please do not be complacent. I hope that you will implement and complete HATS 2B as soon as possible. Thank you very much for completing the cross-harbor swim yesterday. My congratulations. Now please press your present button and then cast your vote by pressing one of the three buttons to indicate whether you are for the motion, against the motion, or abstain from the motion. The voting begins.
投票結束啦。
Voting is closed. Please check your votes before I close the voting. Voting is closed. The result displayed. 8 present, 8 for. Thank you very much. The motion is carried. The second motion is rather long, and it is by the Vice Chairman. Please read it because it is in front of you. Maybe I ask the Vice Chairman to explain his motion. Thank you, Chairman. The motion is long, but it's clear. I hope the departments concerned will work together instead of just working on their own. Individually, they should make good use of the 19 measures. Measure number 7 is for installation of solar panels. And the provision only deals with loading, but not other specifications, and therefore urge the administration to clarify the conditions and specifications, and also set up some models. Do you want a division, or just a show of hands? Just a show of hands will do. Okay, those in favor of the motion, please raise their hands. Those against, please raise their hands. I think the ayes have it. The motion is now carried. The third motion is by Mr. Hui Chi-fung. Mr. Hui, would you please introduce your motion in 1 minute? The administration has been bragging about the promotion of using electric vehicles, yet the administration has measures going against all these efforts. I hope the administration, while capping the growth in the overall number of vehicles, will increase the number of electric vehicles so as to care for the health of the people of Hong Kong. Now you propose a one-for-one arrangement. Here, there is the provision in your motion which is to increase the concession, the tax concession. I now put the motion to the vote. Those in favor, please raise their hands. Those against, please raise their hands. Those who abstain. Those who support the motion, for the motion, is the majority. The motion is now carried. So I hope the administration can make a short response, and then we will move on to the next motion, next item on the agenda. I thank members for supporting our environmental policy, and we will keep in contact, and we will continue to talk to each other. And the departments will work also together to make Hong Kong a more livable city. Thank you very much. May I thank the officials attending the meeting, and we move on to agenda item number 4, which is the implementation of MSWC charging, MSWC, Municipal Waste Charging Scheme. Ms. Ng will stay, Ms. Vicky Kwok will stay, and then 2 ADs from the EPD will join us. And those from the food and food safety panel have been informed, and we also hope that representatives from the FEHD will also be present. We therefore have Mr. Falk.
物環境衛生署助理署長行動3。
Mr. Falk is the AD of FEHD. Perhaps the Secretary can introduce the paper first. Thank you, Chairman. The Bureau announces MSW charging proposal, and then there have been 60 engagement exercises, including 2 public forums, to assess the public's view and also the stakeholders' views on the proposed arrangements. On the whole, the response is positive, but different stakeholders on enhancing the arrangements have made proposals. The administration has addressed the views, and the mechanism we hope can be more fine-tuned to achieve the principle of polluters pay. Since prepaid plastic bags does not need any discussion on the distribution of costs, and the proposal has been widely accepted by the stakeholders. Therefore, we will expand the scope of application of the review specs apart from the MSW collected by FEHD. The designated garbage bags arrangement will also be applicable to those private waste collectors. The collectors are collecting irregular refuse like boxes and also mattresses and things like that. This will be handled by gate fee arrangement. About 80% of the MSW will make use of designated garbage bags, and the remaining 20% will have to be dealt with by gate fee. The government also proposed to abolish the per barrel or per bin charging arrangement. Now, the per bin arrangement, it was only a transitional arrangement. Different stakeholders have said that the transitional arrangement is not really effective, and therefore we abolish that. MSW charging is not for increasing government revenue. It is to encourage the public to change behavior in order to achieve the target of waste reduction and promoting clean recycling. We will put in more resources to support recycling. Apart from the incentives given, we will have a series of new measures. We will set up an outreaching team to provide assistance to property management companies and local residents in terms of waste separation. There will be a central plastic bottle recycling arrangement, and there is also the food waste recycling office group to promote a new round of food waste campaign. We will step up publicity and education to promote dump less, pay less. The primary emphasis is on waste separation and waste reduction, and we give guidelines to PMCs and frontline officers for their reference. With the passage of the bill into law, under the EPD, there will be an office for waste reduction, and the new Municipal Solid Waste Reduction Office will consolidate the resources and work with other government departments to promote will prepare for the implementation of municipal waste charging. In order to help those who are lack of means, we propose that all CSSA recipients will be provided an additional $10 subsidy per month per person. We will introduce a bill ASAP, assuming that the bill will require 12 months to be scrutinized by this council. Then, by the end of 2019, we will implement MSW charging the earliest. We do not underestimate the difficulties. The change of behavior requires time, and we expect that there may be some breach of the law and also some irregularities, but we will do our best.
We have 6 members waiting to speak. 4 minutes each, please. Mr. Gary Chan. I have asked the question again, and I will repeat myself. I support the polluter pays principle, but the government is implementing charging. If you charge, people will try to get around by disposing their waste elsewhere. Why can't we have some positive incentives instead? For example, if you produce less waste, you can save in water or electricity tariffs, etc. Or can you adopt a dual approach? Why isn't the government thinking about offering financial incentives for the public? As for the fly tipping, we have been talking about this for a long time. And to quote what Mr. Frank Yik said about Mrs. Carrie Lam, we do not need a dedicated fund. Why can't the charge be why can't the fees be used to support the recycling trade? Deputy Director, thank you very much. On the waste charging principles, I'm very happy that Mr. Chen supports the polluter pays principle. And based on this principle, we have drawn up our charging scheme. In other countries, waste charging would provide a financial incentive to encourage waste reduction at source. And in the past 3 years, we have explained that the proposed charge is $1.1 per liter. This is not to drive revenue for the government, but the government hopes to offer a financial incentive for waste recycling or waste reduction. We promise that this level would not change in the first 3 years. So you can see that this doesn't serve to increase government revenue. So what's the point? Why can't you have an encouraging or incentives? As for incentives, the polluter pays principle means that if you dump less, you pay less. If you still receive an extra financial incentive if you simply dump less, this might not be right under this principle. But we do want to encourage less dumping and more recycling. So at the community recycling stations in 18 districts, some incentives might be given for the reception of recyclables. I think your proposal might not satisfy the polluter pays principle. As for the use of the fees or the dedicated use of the fees collected, the key is whether we are investing enough on recycling facilities. Regardless of the progress of the MSW charging scheme, we have been promoting recycling facilities in the past. To dovetail with the MSW charging scheme, we have relevant measures in place. We will send outreach teams to different areas to provide on-site support to housing estates to promote clean recycling. So you can see that we have put in more resources on supporting recycling. Mr. Frankie Yik, thank you. I'd like to thank the Environment Bureau on dealing with waste charging for CNI premises. As for waste which could not be put into garbage bags, there would be a gate fee in the future. Is that correct? Waste and garbage bags would be chargeable, but what about those in landfills? What is the charging level? Is it $390 per ton? It would be $30 cheaper per unit. For refuse transfer stations, they charge different fees at different stations, which is strange. In the future, there would be another charging level for landfills, so the trade would like to know whether there could be a unified charge at Shuttlecock Road or Two Moon Road, since it's free to dispose trash there. There is heavy congestion. So if you charge different fees for different sites, then people would prefer the cheaper sites. So are you going to unify the charges so that people can go wherever it's convenient? Would you consider that? Deputy Director, we are yet to implement MSW charging, but for refuse collection vehicles, they have to pay a $30 gate fee, whereas they don't have to pay such a fee for entering landfills. We will continue to maintain a difference of about $30, which would not lead to triage or diversion issues. Does it mean that vehicles that enter landfills in the future would only have to pay $30? For those entering landfills, we suggest a fee of $365, and the gate fee would be $395, so the difference would be $30. Would you unify the charges in different transfer stations? The fee at refuse transfer stations would be $395, but for stations at the outlying islands, the charge would be different. At North Lantau, the charge is most expensive, and it will be $1.1 per 0.5 tons, but the charge levels are different in Hong Kong Island and New Territories. Why is there such a difference? Is it based on distance? Why are you charging different levels? Chairman, I wonder which paragraph or which annex you are talking about. Well, the trade told me about these figures. They sent me the charging scheme. Perhaps you should go back and look at that. The charges are not consistent, and the gate fee should be consistent. Why are there different charges in different areas? So would you try to find out why there is such a difference for the $30 gate fee? That is how it would be charged. As for the different gate fees in different transfer stations, we understand that there are slight differences, so perhaps we will follow up on that after the meeting. Mr. Shiu Ka-fai, thank you. I think the purpose of MSW charging is to reduce waste rather than to increase revenue. Is that the case? Yes, this is certainly our direction. For an average family who needs to purchase garbage bags, and they might be encouraged to produce less waste if they have to pay for garbage bags. So I agree with the logic. But for businesses, for example, caterers or frontline workers, this might not work. As you know, businesses would not produce unnecessary waste. They do not want to produce waste, but they do need to operate And the same goes for catering. Of course, they hope guests can finish all the food and they don't want to deal with food waste, but this is something they cannot avoid. So this might not necessarily work for businesses because they simply have no choice. It's up to their customers. So you might not be able to achieve waste reduction. So what is your consideration on businesses? Quantity-based waste charging has been implemented in other places, including Asian countries. There's an impact. They have achieved impacts on the society. For example, if there are things which could not be recycled, there would be a pressure by businesses in the future. For example, businesses would be encouraged to reduce the use of non-recyclable packaging, and both businesses and consumers would be encouraged to rethink their habits. So for retailers, businesses, and households, there would be a trend for waste reduction. But in terms of the logic, I'm not quite convinced. As a consumer or business, we cannot. We would be unlikely to discuss the reduction of packaging. Once the charging is implemented at Bremer Hill, there are 3 big piles of trash, and in the future people will dump construction waste. This is the situation at Bremer Hill. This is something you cannot avoid. I'm sure in the future you will see piles of trash in relatively uninhabited areas. We have a fixed penalty of $1,500. If they are caught, then it's the fine. The penalty they pay is equivalent to 5 years of MSW charge. Mr. Ted Hui, thank you. I generally support the government's plan and measures. For example, the abolishment of the per bin charging arrangement.
I also support the prepaid garbage bag arrangement. That is in line with the polluter pays principle. But in respect of the enhancement measures, you have not adopted them. Now, one is the reward arrangement. Now, people feel aggrieved because they pay and they don't know where you spend the money you have collected from them. If you can take the lead in providing rewards, and if you can do something symbolic to encourage people to cut waste, then it will be good. Say, for example, you can reward them by giving them the bags free of charge if they can perform up to a certain standard. Now I think you should give us an estimate, say with the change of behavior, how much government revenue will be increased from this, and then people can measure whether you will give a similar commitment to measures implementing waste reduction measures. And people can therefore do their sums to see if whether you really honor your words concerning spending the money you've obtained from the garbage bags to enhance environmental protection. We try to take on board the views of the public in terms of enhancing the scheme. My colleagues have already addressed members' questions concerning reward. And in fact, pay less, gain more, save more is very specific. Say if you reduce waste, then you may not need to pay about $30 per month for the garbage bags. You may just pay $10 or so. That is a reward. We also have community recycling centers. Encouragement will be given. Say, for example, a small present will be given if you hand over the recyclables to these centers up to a certain amount. Now, municipal waste charging, according to quantity, is in fact a kind of incentive. As for resources, in the policy address, we have introduced new measures to fit in with the municipal solid waste charging arrangement. And in fact, we are investing heavily on waste management facilities. Our proposal is not for cost recovery. I think members have to help us to explain to the public. We are not doing full cost recovery through waste charging. We will put in more resources on waste management, and will provide better facilities. Mr. Chu Hai-tek. Thank you, Chairman. I have several suggestions. First, concerning the polluters pay principle promoted by the administration, as said by Mrs. Xiu, people have the feeling that at the end, they are not the only source of waste production. So, for example, the producer provides the packaging. The sellers provide the packaging. So who is the polluter at the end? Now, say for the retailers, they provide the packaging. You may have to give guidelines to them. You may have some strong measures so that they will cut the packaging. Under the PRS, the government claims that it's doing this. And people expect that from now till 2019, in respect of several categories of products, there can be some substantial progress, and that will be helpful. Furthermore, concerning the recycling industry, whether there will be further development of the recycling industry because of municipal waste charging, I think they are interrelated, and you cannot think in isolation. I also agree with Mr. Chen, but I think the Secretary has not answered his question fairly. You say it's a reward if you dump less and save more. Well, that's not true. And it is also not as what Mr. Chen has said. If one cuts waste, then one will be given a monetary reward. I think emphasis should be put on providing incentive upon recycling. Say the Secretary refers to a small product. You can regularize that. You can even turn it into a system so that people understand that at the point of recycling, you'll be given a reward. And I also hope the Bureau will consider this. we have a committee, a subcommittee on refuse collection and resource recovery. Now you have the community resource centers, just 18, one in each district, but there are hundreds of refuse collection points. Why can't you expand the concept from the community recycling centers to all the refuse collection points? In particular, you can have a pilot scheme for new refuse collection points. And you use these refuse collection points as community recycling centers as well. And finally, the point raised by Mr. Leung Yiu-chung should be considered. People will consider how they will respond. And one is about food waste. If you force me to dispose of food waste, but you don't give me any incentive to deal with that, then there is no solution to the problem of reducing food waste, and you need to find some way to help them. I think it's a process. In overseas countries, when they started charging waste according to quantity, they started with a process, a system which is not comprehensive, which does not cover everything. Now we have a committee. We work with the FHD and different departments to look at each refuse collection point and we'll consider adding recycling facilities to the refuse collection points. Say, in South Korea, they also charge on food waste. With more food waste, their infrastructure cannot cope. Even if there is separation food waste from municipal waste, they still impose a charge, though the charge is lower. That's the Korean experience. Well, you really can't justify it. Even if you reduce the waste. Say, for example, in my home, we don't dispose of many plastic bottles. But if you reduce the disposal of plastic bottles, you will be rewarded. That is not justifiable. Well, according to the trade, they are unable to pay in advance, and therefore I welcome the payment per bin arrangement, or the bin counting arrangement, and I welcome that. I welcome the abolition of the bin counting arrangement. There's a problem of the plastic bags. If the plastic bags burst, then what? How can we deal with that? And people can also dump their refuse in the refuse collection bins in the streets. And we have already seen that. In Para 12, it said that there will be a hotline, there will be mobile applications, there will be the observers arrangement. I don't know whether these are effective, and will there be a CCTV system or things like that? How can you balance the monitoring with privacy? It is difficult to provide a reward because the government thinks that it is people's responsibility. Well, many people can do waste separation, but the facilities are not adequate. Is there any policy to help those who are willing to do waste separation? The facilities are not adequate, and therefore people are forced to dump their waste in the landfills. Now we have a committee a steering committee to assess municipal waste charging and how to make some changes in terms of the refuse collection bins. We take into the account of experience in Taipei and Korea. There will be a new design of waste bins. I will go to the housing estates and will visit the local communities. We help the elderly to participate in waste separation, to participate in clean waste recycling. Now, in the process of handling waste, say for example, the garbage bags may burst. The provision in the law will deal with that. If you have used the designated bags, then in handling the waste, if say the bag bursts, or there is the dropping of refuse because of the handling process, a defense will be given to the waste producer. As for the use of technology, there is the mobile app for members of the public to report on compliance. We also have so-called tracing and tracking equipment for the refuse vehicles, and also will consider using technology to deal with large-scale non-compliance. I will speak also a piece of my mind on this issue. I met with the director and the secretary earlier on. Now you did a pilot scheme on different types of buildings. I know that you'll continue to work on that. I hope that you can share us with some experience. And I hope that you can also have some short videos, short APIs to encourage people to exhibit. Apart from considering whether it's convenient or not, people also can be encouraged in terms of their civic mindedness. Concerning the law, it will be a new ordinance. In paragraph 22, it said that you expect that the bill can be passed within 12 months, including summer. From your smile, do you expect even a faster process?
On the waste disposal ordinance, we have an amendment bill, and the paper lists out the estimated timeline, and after introducing the bill into LegCo, we will have to see how long the scrutiny of the bill will take. And you suggested experience sharing, and under the Environment and Conservation Fund, there are a number of community involvement projects, and in the future we will do more experience sharing. For example, cases of single block buildings, and we have seen some successful cases, and we can see that per quantity charging is possible in those buildings. We will come up with tips on how people can carry out clean recycling. We will also come up with best practice guides, and we will offer tips to frontline workers. And in some countries, before implementation of charging, they would encourage people to dump larger pieces of trash free of charge. This is something you should think about. Second round, we have missed that issue. 3 minutes each. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to know when the committee report would be out, and I hope they can learn more from the community green stations. It's not just about the number or design of the litter bins. The community green stations have a community element that would be much more effective. As for the designated garbage bags, there has never been another product in Hong Kong which is equally important. Yesterday, a logistics worker told me that even Coca-Cola has no such experience dealing with a commodity like the designated garbage bag. So would they be sold at existing merchants? And if certain models of the bags are out of stock, what would happen? So when you build the system, I'd like to know your consideration on this. Many people would dispose trash via garbage bags, but they would use some grocery plastic bags or bags for food. So in the future implementation, how can you make sure that there won't be two types of or different types of plastic bags? So how can you avoid or prevent people from using different types of bags together? As for the litter reform committee, after every meeting, we issued a press release so that the public would know what is going on. As for the designated bags, at convenience stores and supermarkets, we will try to offer greater convenience to users. As the Secretary said, our principle is to offer convenience. So we will have 4,000 points of sale all around Hong Kong, and at remote areas we might have vending machines so that the designated bags can be easily purchased. We understand that there are different sizes and different requirements. So ensuring the availability of different models at different points of sales, this is something we will bear in mind. Mr. Chu asked whether we can, whether existing bags would cease to be distributed and whether supermarkets might use designated bags. We realize that in some places, such as Taipei, they have similar practice, and we can at least use one plastic bag less. We will explore whether this can be adopted in Hong Kong and whether merchants can offer bigger 20-liter bags instead of the normal plastic shopping bags. Mr. Guo Wai-kang, we have asked Ms. Eddie Chu's question before. We trust that the government would come up with a response. As for the 50-cent bags, they vary in shapes and sizes. So you have to consider the impacts of the price difference on consumers' choice. If I pay $1 for a small green bag, but if I pay 50 cents in the supermarket, I would get a big bag. So the customers or consumers would make comparisons. This is something you must be wary of. I'd like to ask about food waste management. The policy address talked about a dedicated food waste recycling group to deal with commercial food waste, and we welcome that. So is it the case that you would deal with commercial food waste because it's easier to do, and you would not do anything about domestic food waste? As you know, domestic food waste also requires attention. Are you going to ignore it, or are you going to wait? And how long do we have to wait? Thank you very much. We are indeed very concerned about food waste, and with MSW charging, we are very concerned about food waste. And in our 2014 food waste plan, we outline how the government can work with different stakeholders to reduce food waste disposal. Our central policy is to establish a network of organic resources, recycling centers, and we want to work on waste to energy. And we are doing it step by step. We are learning from other countries, and at these food waste facilities, we will begin with the C&I sector. The ease of implementation is one of the factors because the quantity and quality of food waste generated is more consistent. So this would be a good start. But it is not that we are not doing anything with domestic food waste. We are trying to build more food waste processing plants. Our first plant would be put in use early next year, and we will have number 2 and number 3. And by that time, our processing capacity would be 800 tons, and by then we will have enough capacity to deal with domestic food waste. So we are conducting a territory-wide food waste recycling plan. We have to think about the arrangements and logistics. We want to educate people on food waste separation or sorting, and in terms of waste reduction at source through our Food Wise campaign, we can see that it has achieved positive results for domestic food waste. So waste reduction is always the most important, and we have to learn about waste recycling. So under the recycling fund, we are subsidizing housing estates and schools to teach them about separation. Can I continue, Chairman, if no one else is waiting? Time is up. We have other business to deal with. All right, please wait for the next time. Under any other business, we have had a very long morning. So any other business? Subcommittee on Refuse Collection and Resource Recovery, they submitted a report, and that is LC paper number CB-1 27/17-18. Members, please take note of the subcommittee report. Since the subcommittee has completed the work entrusted by the panel, the subcommittee would be dismissed. So barring any other business, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.